welcome to yet another edition of Time Pass for the New Indian Express. I have with me the wonderfully talented and so varied in his career, Saif Ali Khan. Saif, thank you so much for joining us. Saif has been a real treasure for the past, 27 years. It's quite amazing. He's entertained us across genres, across platforms. He's reinvented himself, I don't know how many times, and has always been just so delightful to watch on screen. Thank you so much for joining us, Saif, and for being a voice, a very sober and sane voice in these very trying times. How have you really negotiated this whole period? First, of course, I have two messages for you, Saif. I'm sorry, I've not even given you a chance to speak. One is to congratulate you on Kareena Kapoor's 20 years in cinema, and two, to congratulate you for being Taimur's dad. So that's out of the way.
Well, I mean, the former had absolutely nothing to do with me, and the second one wasn't very difficult to produce. It was quite a pleasure, in fact.
I hope so. But really, Saif, you've been such a remarkable actor, and you've reinvented yourself so many times. What have you been doing these last 3 months? Have you been reading, watching cinema? What have you been doing?
Ask me, what have I been doing the last 3 months? My God, it's been literally, well, we try and make some kind of a routine, which has slightly collapsed recently. I think we need a new routine. But reading, I think the most special thing has been spending some quality time with young Taimur.
Yes.
And because one of us is usually traveling or working, and in the lockdown, you know, we've really had a chance to be together without any of us going anywhere, which I think has been the most special part. Apart from that, I've been playing quite a lot of guitar and trying to improve that, and reading a lot, and practicing a bit of language skills. Just, I thought that we shouldn't lose this time. And I mean, there's a certain amount of time you get for personal things in life, at least I do, in between work and family. So the way I'm looking at it is, let's say that we've got all the time now, you know, so we shouldn't waste it. And when this is over, we shouldn't feel that, okay, I didn't do any of those things, you know?
Saif, you read a lot of history. I know you read a lot, and you read a lot of history as well. What does history teach us about the times we're living in now?
Well,
Have we been here before?
Yeah, I think we've been here many times before, and all kinds of things have happened in the past, actually probably much worse than this. So, you know, the things that come to mind are things like the plague, the Black Death.
Right.
In fact, one of the things I was reading was, it's a book called The Decameron.
Right.
Sorry. Which is actually an Italian book, which is, it kind of came before Chaucer, and it was a new style of kind of writing where they would have, you know, they have sort of 10 people who are taking refuge from the plague in a villa in Italy. And to pass the time, they tell each other stories. So that is the format of the book. And they're actually in quarantine, these people, while they're entertaining themselves. So I thought it was quite interesting to be reading that. There's also things like The 1001 Nights, which is another kind of a desperate situation where a woman is, where she's trying to buy time. So she's telling a story that is holding a, you know, her potential murderer's interest night after night after night. So, which is a quite, you know, similar to how I'm feeling. So I thought that would be an interesting thing to read. And things like this. So I think historically, and then there's been memoirs of people who've been imprisoned, who managed to create some kind of a timetable, you know, to keep themselves sane, whether it's telling stories. And in many ways, we're very lucky because we can divide our time in different ways. You can be a little academic, you can be creative, you can read the things that you've always planned to read but never had the chance, you know, and you can learn things, and the internet is so amazing. I mean, you can you know, brush up on some language, like I said, or you can do many, many things. I think the trick is not to think about too much about the past and not to think too much about the future. But if you take every day as it comes and just, you know, try and do what you enjoy, there's actually a lot to be done. I mean, we've been gardening. We don't even have a garden. We've got a tiny little balcony with a few flower pots on it, but we've been growing things on that. And, you know, I've been cooking a lot every evening. I actually prefer the evenings, I'm sorry to say, to the mornings, because every evening I try and cook something.
Okay.
And
What have you
I
been
really look
cooking,
forward to
Saif?
that. Oh, everything. I've got quite a wide repertoire now from, you know, we've done biryanis on, you know, with layers, and, you know, done a little bit of Chinese stuff like lo mein. And yesterday I cooked an Asian fish in kind of salmon in soy sauce. So
Wow.
various amounts, you know, there's a healthy chicken, there's some vegetarian food. There's a lot of stuff that I've been cooking every day for about 90 days. So I've gotten better at it.
But actually, you've been a chef on screen as well. Possibly one of the first chefs we had in Salam Namaste, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think in that at that time it was so unusual to have the kind of professions that you had, say in Hum Tum. Of course, you were a cartoonist. We've had cartoonists before, but you were a chef. Then, of course, you played a chef again. So, you know, this amazing ability you have to transition from rom-coms to Omkara to Ek Hasina Thi. How, of course, you're an actor, you can do it, but it was exciting times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really nice working. Someone like Siddharth Anand back then was always trying to, you know, do something new. There's a lot of
Right.
energy with filmmakers. I mean, it's one of those professions that has a drive where people are trying. I mean, they're aware of what's happening in the world and they're aware of
Right.
what's happening in India, and they're trying to, uh, you know, somewhere marry those ideas. And it's quite exciting because a lot of people I speak to have very fresh ideas and have had
Yeah.
fresh ideas constantly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great. I mean, you know, all credit to them for coming up with, and and to us as a film industry to be able to do, you know, a film like Salam Namaste and film like Omkara and all is lucky.
And I think that scene in Love Article will go down in posterity where you're crying in front of the fire. I think it's, again, one of the few scenes where you actually see a man breaking down on screen and, you know, not being sort of too tied to the idea of being a, you know, a macho man.
Well, I guess maybe that's been some kind of contribution, where, you know, I've had a chance to play slightly more, you know, human, normal uh, characters who are more vulnerable and
Yes.
perhaps not as invulnerable or super successful or kind of slightly normal kind of guys. So if that's, you know, lent a little bit of something to a pop culture, then great.
Yeah. It has, I think, and I think, Saif, it's also been very interesting over these past 3 months. In a way, you've been involved with the two biggest issues we've had. You know, you're acting in Sushant Singh Rajput's last film, and you were the quieter one on the couch when Kangana Ranaut called out Karan for this so-called nepotism. So I can't not ask you about those two issues. How is it working with Sushant in Dil Bechara? And then we come to
Well,
you know, the
I thought
Karan.
Sushant was a very talented actor and very nice, you know, good-looking guy. And
Yeah,
I thought, you know, that this kind of, in fact, I thought about him generally that if I was producing a movie, and he did a film with my partner, ex-partner, Dinesh Vijan, um,
yeah,
uh,
Rab,
yeah, who probably shouldn't have directed him, but did.
yeah,
Um, and
yes,
he was very, you know, I thought this is, you know, a really bright kind of future because he seemed to have everything. I mean, you know, he looked very, very good and he was talented and he'd been very successful as well in his career. So when I came across him, he was very polite and very nice because I was doing a guest appearance in his movie. and the way things are in the business, they weren't actually getting an actor very easily to just come in and do a guest appearance. I think people tend to think a lot about doing something like that, you know. And there's, I think our generation, there's a few of us in my generation who really wouldn't think too much about helping out sometimes. And I think he appreciated that. So he was really nice. And we met in Paris. That's the only time I've really met him. But he was warm with me ever since. And I'd met him a couple of times after that. And of course, he worked with Sarah.
Yeah.
But my experience of him was someone really supportive and nice. And, you know, he seemed very bright. And he was being, you know, he was being very nice to me. And he wanted to come over and have a chat. And he said there's many things he'd like to talk to me about, like astronomy and philosophy. But I got the feeling he was a bit brighter than I was. So I'm not sure what philosophy we would have discussed.
And, you know, what do you think of the backlash against Karan Johar? You've been someone who's worked with him quite closely. And I think, again, Kal Ho Na Ho was quite a remarkable film for its time. We possibly didn't appreciate it completely.
You know, I had absolutely no idea what Kangana was saying on Coffee with Karan. That's why I was so shocked, because,
yeah.
I mean, I think if you come onto a show and if you've got an agenda prepared to kind
Right.
of, you know, take the host down, my mind doesn't work like that. So I don't understand. I mean, you know, if so I was a little surprised, obviously. But these issues have absolutely nothing to do with me, and I tend to find myself in the middle of them. So maybe I should think through it 3 times before commenting. But as far as Karan goes, I mean, I think somehow he's made himself this very large symbol, you know, and that symbol, and since he's put on so many different hats and he's been in so many different places, it seems that, like what happens to symbols sometimes, he's attracting, you know, a lot of flack for that. Now, whether it's all deserved or not deserved, I'm sure it's not all deserved. The truth is always very complicated, you know.
Yes.
There's much more to it, but unfortunately, people aren't interested in the truth. They're just interested in symbols, and there's a symbol for something, and he just happens to be at the moment a symbol for something that is not very popular.
Yes.
I hope that tides over, and I hope the better things that he is known for, primarily for being a filmmaker and a very successful producer, these things shine through, and that is ultimately what he should be known for, and I'm sure will be known for. But I don't know, these are very turbulent times, you know, like there's been, I think what it is we haven't had a revolution, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of cultures that I'm familiar with or that I've read about have had very bloody revolutions. I mean, for example, the French Revolution was something that really took the matter of privilege and people who are deserving and kind of nepotism, if you will, to another level, and really slaughtered the aristocracy on the streets, you know, and the reign of terror. So, and then later on, everyone calms down. So, I mean, I think nations also can, you know, tensions and feelings can, and inequality particularly, and there's so much inequality in India, can lead to a kind of situation where it needs to explode. And if it's not exploding violently, then it needs an outlet. And maybe a social media outlet is actually far more polite and far less, you know, barbaric, even though it's a pretty volatile environment, than a genuine revolution, you know. But I think it's a similar feeling that would normally lead to a revolution. And I think it's a very unfair situation in our country, because the gap between, and not just in our country, actually, all over the world, the gap between people who are wealthy and the people who are not getting a paycheck is just increasing. And so that's one thing, and that's an issue that is there. Nepotism is something completely different. There's many levels also to nepotism. I mean, whether it's favoritism, whether it's campism, people like to work with people they're comfortable with. Is that a bad thing? Nepotism in its purest form, I mean, is something that even I've been a victim of, but nobody's interested in that. I mean, businesses work like that. You know, I'm not going to take names, obviously, but you know, somebody's dad has rung up and said, you know, don't take him in the movie, and all that happens. It's happened to me. So I don't know what to say. I'll say that more than ever, I'm really happy to see so many kids from, you know, the institute, from NSD, from the Film Institute coming to the foreground. I've worked with people like Nawazuddin. You know, I'm seeing people like Pankaj Tripathi becoming such household names with the work they've done. So, and I've heard Sushant, who probably shouldn't be dragged into this, say himself that yes, nepotism exists, and yes, there are a lot of people who also have made it through their own steam. And I think that's a struggle that will be ongoing. And as long as people continue to get a fair chance, that seems to be the way of the world. But I really think it's not okay to give people, you know, from certain backgrounds, chances over people who have more talent. So, okay, so, you know, I hope I'm not rambling, but the ugliest thing in nepotism is when somebody who is talented and has ability is replaced due to nepotism by somebody who isn't as talented and isn't as I have no explanation for that. I'm sure that's happened sometimes, and I'm pretty sure it'll happen less and less, and I'm sure it happens in every department of the country. And it's just one of those things that a developing nation has to deal with, where, I mean, the existence is a constant struggle. At least society and history show us that we're constantly struggling with trying to change preconceived notions, you know, whether it's racism that has to be questioned, attitudes are questioned all the time. And these are areas that need fixing. And I'm sure with, you know, argument, with dialogue, and with, you know, demonstration, there will be some kind of good change coming out of it. I mean, it's certainly become a burning issue that is, but I see in Indian films and in our movie industry, a huge wave of so many actors. I mean, all these young top actors, you know, who've come up on their own steam rather than have godfathers or fathers backing them. You know, I'm very happy to see that.
Yeah, and the directors and the writers, they're bringing in a completely fresh idea of storytelling from very different parts of India as well.
I mean, India is not a very old independent nation, you know. I mean, of course, we're incredibly old. The soil of this country, I mean, I always say, like, I think the cow is a perfect symbol for us. Like, I've driven in Rajasthan, and you just see this peaceful animal that seems to have seen it all, you know. It's seen it all. And it's watching it as it's like a natural speed breaker, because people who drive fast and on the highways have to slow down and kind of, anyway.
That's interesting. That's possibly one of the reasons why it's worshipped as well.
I don't know. Absolutely. I think I spent a lot of time looking at cows on my time in Rajasthan, and I thought it to be a very beautiful, very peaceful, very wise looking animal, you know, who's seen everything come, you know, empires rise and fall and all this kind of thing. But as a political entity, you know, 1948 is not that long ago. So a lot is adjusting. And there's been an attitude, and probably a colonial attitude, that, you know, Indians are a certain way, and Virat Kohli and his cricket team has kind of shrugged that off on the sporting field. I mean, there's many other players like, you know, Miss Sandhu, etc. I mean, I don't want to get into naming everyone, but we're changing our own image in various ways, and even politically, we're changing our image, and there's a lot of things happening. So it's an extremely turbulent time. It's an exciting time, you know, because this is what leads to development.
Right. And Saif, when you look around at the stories that come to you, especially, you were possibly one of the first big stars to take to you know, the OTT platform as it's known. What attracted you to it? The long form, the leisure of storytelling, the way the character could develop, the slowness of things.
No, I mean, well, okay. The idea behind Netflix is to change. it's a very revolutionary idea, actually. What historically and traditionally, we have been
Yeah.
taught that the smaller the screen, the smaller the paycheck, the smaller the idea, and the
Yeah.
smaller the whatever, And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the entire infrastructure, even the psychological infrastructure that goes along with it changes,
Yeah.
and it's not as good. So it's probably better to be in movies, is what we've been told.
Hmm.
But that, I think Netflix completely wanted to challenge that no, you could have a better viewing experience on your
Yes.
phone or at home than you could in the theater. And therefore they spend money, and money is the key. They
Hmm.
spend money and they have talent writing and they have talent acting, and before you know it, you've got a big budget thing happening on a small screen. So that's a revolutionary idea. And it's changing. The fact that we've got all these digital appliances like phones and computers everywhere, to create content for that seemed just like a really nice platform, like how an actor would do a play, in a theater, or would do a film for the screen. You would do something for the web. And all of them should be slightly different in terms of content, like you said. Ideally, the web should probably be a long form kind of story where you could get into a saga, for example, like let's say the Mughal
Right.
Empire, or the story of, the East India Company, or something like that, with proper costume drama, taking your time to tell a story. And when Netflix offered it to me, and I mean, I've been watching Netflix shows, and I knew that Narcos, was this global phenomenon. And when
Right.
they tried, when they came to India and said, we want to make an original series, it's not something they do very often. Um,
Yeah.
so it had all the right things to it. A female actor, a co-star of mine, told my manager that, oh, is Saif doing television now? Because they didn't get it. It's
Right.
not television. It's a streaming service for a platform that is a revolutionary platform. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a no-brainer doing it. It was one of the best experiences of my life, because everybody working on it was trying to be clever. I mean, very
Right.
often, sometimes, if you're in the right movie and you're doing the right thing, that if you do a movie like Tanaji and you're working with that director, is trying to be, as creative with his computer graphics and his largeness
Yeah.
of story. So you feel you're at the edge of something, the cutting edge of something. But sometimes when you do mass cinema, you're not trying to be clever. You're trying to be
Yeah.
understood by as many people as possible, which is
Right.
different. Here you were just trying to be as technically, emotionally, like as an actor, um, as clever as possible. And that's such a good feeling for a human being who's an actor.
And Sacred Games 3 is coming up.
I don't know. I don't know. I think the story, who knows? It's a lovely character. I would love to revisit it. Um, if somebody offered me if Netflix offered me a part as Sartaj Singh again, I'd be very happy to do it. I could do it really well because I'm quite familiar with it.
Yeah, and whoever thought you'd be playing a Sardar, you've already played this sort of rural UP guy in Omkara, but playing a Sardar was fun. I loved the way you dug into the parathas.
No, I really enjoy playing a Sardar for many reasons.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons is I think the turban looks amazing. And
You were one in Love Ajkal as well, of course, the first part.
yes, but that was the
Yeah,
first time. And this is something I actually lived for much longer. Um,
yeah,
and by the time the second season rolled around, I think I'd really grown into it. And I mean, it looks really good. So you feel, yeah, slightly regal anyway with that turban on your head. And of course, it's actually really, in the heat, it's a nice thing to wear because it kind of stops you sweating, and it's actually quite cool. So
okay.
I really enjoyed it, um, very much. I think it looked great. And when I
Yeah,
see that piece of film, I really don't look like myself. And that's
yeah.
always nice, when you're like, okay, I can no longer see me. I finally checked out, and this is the character.
Has that happened to you very often?
No, but it does happen once in a while, which is something. I mean, apparently it happens to Al Pacino all the time, but It happens sometimes. It's where you're trying to get as an actor, and you can see it, and you can see it. I can see it on screen, and then sometimes you're like, okay, great, now I've gone. And the idea is to, you know, practice and rehearse so that the quicker you get out of there and the character takes over, the better. But it happens. It's happening more and more these days.
Yeah, I think in Lal Kaptan, I felt that in Lal Kaptan as well.
Well, Lal Kaptan is a really nice effort, and I'm proud I did it. And I think my wife deserves an award for like letting me go for 6 months to play, you know, silly buggers in Rajasthan with that bunch of people trying to make cinema. Like Deepak Dobriyal also, I mean, gave his life and soul to that. Really impressive performance from him. And Navdeep's kind of like a one-man show. I feel now, I wish the film should have been a little more like a superhero kind of movie than a Western. We should have really approached it as a different genre, but I wanted to do a Western. I love Westerns. And I had a really good time doing it with him. He's great. It was a lot of fun. Very difficult to kind of try and make that character convincing for me. I've never had so much stuff on. But after doing it, I understood what period films are. I understood that every bit of, you know, costume kind of tells a story, so you need it. And I also developed a tremendous amount of patience having makeup done for a couple of hours. I've never done something like that before. I know people have done prosthetics. It's something I don't look forward to much, but to do it every day and just kind of tune out and live that role in that film. I mean, I came back as a slightly different person. It was, you know, 6 months, and then people used to tell me I'm looking different while it was on. So some of these experiences change you, you know.
Yeah. Saif, it's hard to believe, but you're going to be 50 this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I look a lot like my mother, and I have a lot of her genes, obviously, I think, which probably means I might inherit some stomach issues as well. But
of course, all Bengalis have that.
Yeah, really?
Yes,
well,
I can take a vouch for it.
But Mom, Amma looks very young, and she, you know, when she was 50, I think she looked like in her late 30s. Yeah. So that's a brilliant gift. Thank you, Mummy, for an actor, especially a Hindi film actor, where youth and beauty is probably paramount.
But you know, I'm sorry, but you know, you remind me more of your dad. I've had 2 conversations with him in your duplex lane house. Yeah. And in fact, he used to wear a kurta pajama pretty much like you. Yeah. And in his library, and I think he was again one of the finest readers of history, literature I've ever known. And he would never talk about cricket. It would always be about the books he'd read. And he would never talk about himself. He was such a fine guy.
It would be difficult to engage him in conversation, but if you got him talking about something he liked, then it was great. He was a very reticent person. He didn't need to talk. So it was one of those people, you know. They say as an actor that you only talk when you want something. So he must have been very satisfied because he didn't say much.
But he loved to talk about books. I think he was perhaps a storyteller in many ways, which you inherited as well.
I think he could have done a lot of things. I think he would have been a nice actor as well. He looked like Al Pacino.
Oh, he did, for sure. But have you come across anything recently that you would like to turn into something that you'd like to watch?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, like I keep thinking a saga on the Mughals would be quite interesting to kind of reinvent that space. Yeah. And of course, there's the old ideas of the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. What excites me most creatively, I think, is I don't know if it'll ever happen, but to take something that you're not even thinking about as being a cliched view, because that's the only way you've ever seen it, you know, and to reinvent that somehow. For example, to do, like, you've got a certain image of what the Ramayana should look like, you know, like if you did that again, and just, you know, with the costumes and the treatment and the kind of thing, just tweaked it so that it becomes somehow appealing to young kids in that way, you know.
As long as
Reinvention.
you're not pilloried for it, because that could be a sensitive subject. Mahabharata
Yeah, it'd
is
be
seen as
difficult.
more political and less religious, I think.
No, I think
It's
they're all.
interesting.
I think they're all religious and political. You'll get in lots of trouble. Depends who makes it. You'll have to get somebody
Huh.
who's quite connected. There are people
Yeah.
who, you know, who are. You get some nice connected person to do and then you have to get it right. Or then you do a Bahubali. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying that these are things. You're saying, what would you do?
Yeah.
Which are the books that be so Mahabharata, Ramayana first, you know, in a web show that would be. Something on the Mughals, maybe something in the East India Company, maybe anything that would be some sort of saga. There's so many books actually that would lend themselves to.
I was thinking of Anarchy, which would be perfect for you. I
Exactly.
don't know if
Yeah,
you've read it. Yeah,
I
it
have
would be
read. I've
lovely.
read. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, but of course, we're also talking of Mughal saga, which Karan is making currently.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that will turn out to be interesting.
Yes.
But it's tough, isn't it, Saif, to make something that is not immediately that a political motive is not immediately attached to it. It's tough in this
Listen,
environment.
I'm saying India is quite a mix of people, and I don't know. I think we should not be too quick to judge what's happening, in the sense that, you know, you might, like, some, depending on your upbringing, depending on your schooling and your religion or who you are, you might have a different take on so many things, you know, and that's how the world works. But I think the way things are going, um, I'd be very happy as an actor to work with people like, for example, you know, the people who made Tanaji. Um,
Yeah.
they really caught the spirit of the nation when you tell a story like that, an unsung hero, an unsung kind of Maratha warrior.
Yes.
Uh, so if you work with people who tell those kind of stories as an actor, if you're being offered parts, then rather than have your own version of things, it's nice to, you know, be able to work with them. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yes. You don't necessarily
What I'm
have to
saying
agree
is,
with the
leave the
politics of
historicals.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and leave the historicals to the people who understand the nation, at least
Yeah.
in cinema, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a way, it's also the times, as you said, that we're living in, where retelling our stories has become very important. But how we retell them is the important thing.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you know, there's a certain history we've been taught. We've been taught by the
Yes.
English, you know,
Yes.
and we've been taught a colonial sense of history. And that's why, again, I say, I mean, I said something about history and Tanaji, and it all got misconstrued because
Oh, yes.
nobody really
My God.
understood what I was saying.
Yeah. It was
But
such a controversy.
what I am trying to say about that whole thing is that history it depends who you speak to about the history, and it's time we told our own history. It's time we told our version of things, you know, as Indians, and that is the time we're at, and it's a very nationalistic time, and it's an exciting time.
Yeah. And it could be diverse, and it should be diverse. That's the beauty of India, in a way, isn't it?
I mean, even if you see the films that are running, people are liking things like biopics about, you know,
Yeah.
true stories, about success stories, or whatever, stories about unsung heroes of India. You know, that's a heading for it. I believe Ajay Devgan is planning to make lots of films like that. It's a very good idea because that is the spirit of the nation. You know.
Is that a moment which is actually asking for fairness, which is asking for a reinterpretation of sort of the Nehruvian model of India?
Well, I mean, I don't know about the Nehruvian model, but I'm saying it is maybe it is a reinterpretation, and it is fair to have reinterpretations because we've been brought up to think a certain way, you know, some of us, and the books say something, but it depends who you're speaking to sometimes. And in, you know, a country that's obviously Indian and a majority Hindu country living in, you know, in India, will want to hear their point of view. Now, why should they want to hear an English point of view or a foreigner's point of view on things? So, I mean, I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. So,
And
Saif, before we let you go, we have to ask you.
Sorry, I'm just saying a lot of history needs revision, actually. Even the West is doing it. I mean, Tarantino is doing it. I mean, just the concept of kind of like, you know, there's many things that we've taken for granted because we've been told that's how it is. And a lot needs to be revised.
Right. So that's interesting to hear, Saif, because sometimes we tend to get so polarized in the debate between left and right. We tend to ignore some of the good things that perhaps the right wing is also, in a way, trying to tell us. I mean, it's very difficult to be emotionally and intellectually honest today, isn't it?
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm saying before judging, you know, a certain school of thought, you've got to understand what the ground reality is. This, like, because there's inequality in the country, there are people who certain issues are much more important than to people sitting in ivory towers in very comfortable homes talking about other things. Of course, issues like freedom and censorship and all those things, because the intelligent people have seen what happens when dictatorships take over or all these kind of things. So alarm bells are rung and people do talk, but you've got to understand, like in a developing nation, I think everything that's happening is kind of bound to happen and is very understandable also, you know.
What is the one thing that you'd like to do the minute the lockdown ends?
Travel, go to shoot a movie, to go to work. To go to work. That's the first thing I'd like to do, is to start filming. I'm missing working.
Do you have something lined up immediately that you can talk about?
Absolutely. I mean, no, there's that movie Bhoot Police that's lined up. I've still got Bunty Bubbly Part 2 with Aditya Chopra on the floors, which is coming along really well. And we just had 10 days left. And then we got, you know, blocked. There was something we were talking to Netflix about. There's various things. There's actually lots of work being planned.
And there's Delhi, where you're cast as a politician. I'm looking forward to that.
I hope so, yeah.
The one by Ali Abbas Safar?
That's right. It's a nice show. It's quite well written. It's a little, you know, it's got all that politics and, you know, drama and murder and sex and violence and all that kind of backstabbing stuff. That. What else is there, right?
Of course. I mean, politics and sex in one place. I mean, there's nothing quite like it. That's for Amazon, right?
Yes, that's for Amazon.
Great. So before we let you go, Saif, we have to, of course, ask about Taimur and, of course, how much joy he brings to the whole country. But how have you been occupying his time, and how have you been, you know, handling him? I think all dads would want to know.
Well, you know, first of all, he's at a really easy age. A little, well, I mean, you know, I've got a nephew as well. I mean, Karishma's son is a little older. He's 9. He's playing a lot of video games. It depends on the personality. This kid is quite easygoing, and they're very adjusting children, as I'm sure everyone knows. You tell him he has to wear a mask, and he's quite happy to do that. And he's understood that there's this thing called the coronavirus, and that he needs to alter his life. He's also missing running around in the park, but he's really helping us by being just very easy. He's got a routine. He's doing some online studying. You know, he gets on his iPad with some teachers and some other students, and they kind of talk. Then he has some Lego creative classes, and he does some gardening with us and some, you know, like I said, some cooking. He makes obviously something inedible with salt and water and apples. You know, so he's just involved with everything, and then we read to him, and he's really keeping us sane as much as you know, we're trying to bring him up. So like I said, instead of complaining about the time, this is an important time where both parents can kind of impart their great knowledge and wisdom to the child.
Great.
God knows.
Thank
I hope
you
we
so
don't make
much.
I hope we don't make a complete mess of him in lockdown.
Thank you so much, Saif, for being with us and for being such a wonderful conversationalist. It's so rare to have good and decent conversations these days amid all that shrieking and shouting that goes on.
You
So thank you
know,
very much.
I've had your number for years. I think you used to review films, didn't you? Or do you
Yes,
still do?
I did. I did. For India
And
Today.
one of them was quite nice with me. I can't remember. I remember. I was like, okay, you were. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We had a wonderful conversation,
Great.
and thanks very much. And congratulations to Karina again for 20 years. And
Yes.
we'll see you. We'll see you when you do 40 years in, no, 30 years in cinema.
Okay.
Soon.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.